Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Over the last couple years that we've run this channel, we've crammed me into some really tight spaces. Today's video, we're going to do a top 10 of some of my favorite small spaces that the museum has put me into. First, let's look at some of the honorary mentions. One of my favorite weird spaces we've gone to over the years is underneath of museum ships. We've done this a number of times, from ships like Taney and Slater in dry dock to Kidd just sitting there on the in her permanent berth. It's a really unique way of seeing a museum ship that you don't otherwise get to see. But ultimately, it didn't make my top 10 because it wasn't claustrophobic at all. You just had several thousand tons of ship over your head. Likewise, climbing down in the battleship's fuel tanks was one of my favorite places to go. We haven't just done that on Battleship New Jersey, we've also gone into cruiser Olympia's coal bunkers, her fuel tanks, to compare how a coal-fired ship differs from an oil-fired ship. Those are some of my favorite spaces, and they're pretty tight to get into, but once you're there, there's plenty of room. So that did not make the list either. When we were in Hawaii, we climbed Diamond Head and went inside one of the Army's coastal defense bunkers up there that was used for fire control for the artillery. We're on top of Diamond Head, one of the tallest and most iconic points on the island of Oahu. And this is the whole reason for the fortifications up here. This is a rangefinder position. There would have once been a fire control periscope here, rangefinder, and it looks perfectly down the Waikiki beaches. Again, that was a tight space. That was a pretty unique space for this channel to get into, but didn't feel particularly claustrophobic. The coolest thing about it was the bunker was on top of an extinct volcano that we had to climb from the inside to access. Our final honorable mention is the cofferdam that they're using to restore the cruiser Olympia.
Olympia holds the record for being the steel-hulled vessel which has gone the longest without being dry docked. That's incredibly impressive for a historic vessel like this from the 1890s. She has not been dry docked since 1945.
We got to climb down there and see the restoration work that they're doing. And while it's pretty scary having just that thin barrier keeping the ocean out, again, not particularly claustrophobic because you can still see daylight, unlike most places on the ship. So, here we go, getting into our top 10. In the number 10 spot, climbing down inside the triple bottom. So, Iowa-class battleships have 3 layers of steel, which form 2 approximately 3-foot tall fuel tanks underneath of the ship. Climbing down into them was really cool and pretty claustrophobic. While Iowa-class battleships have 3 layers of steel on the bottom, they also have 3 layers of steel protecting them from the top. Climbing inside the Splinter Deck between the lowest level of steel and the main armored deck was a neat series of really cavernous spaces that we got to explore in a couple of videos pretty early on. Because of the ship's subdivision, we've only explored over 1 or 2 of the engineering main spaces, and we still plan on getting up there and climbing around some more. Although, from what we've seen, it looks pretty similar from one engineering main space to the next. A unique space that we got to climb into that Iowa-class battleships do not have was underneath of the bomb elevator on the aircraft carrier Yorktown. Now, aircraft carriers and battleships are built very differently for very different jobs, and whereas we've got our shell hoists and whatnot for delivering ordnance to our ordnance delivery systems, the ship's guns, Yorktown uses bomb elevators to get the bombs from the magazines to the hangars and flight decks where they can arm her aircraft, which are her ordnance delivery systems. So that was a really cool and unique space for somebody like me who's super into battleships, but hasn't spent all as much time on aircraft carriers. In our number 7 spot, we've got the battleship's armored conning tower. Probably the second most claustrophobic I have ever felt on this ship is when we closed the doors inside the armored conning tower. Just went from having air in there to being completely stagnant, and that was really unnerving. But the conning tower itself isn't that bad. There's room for at least 4 sailors in there. The access trunk leading from the conning tower down to Broadway, where all of the electrical cabling coming up for the helm goes through, is a really tight crawl and proved to be too tight for me to crawl out of at the bottom. So I had to climb all the way back up to the top 7 stories. The number 6 spot is another ordnance delivery system that battleships don't have. At least not the one I work on. We got to climb inside a 21-inch torpedo tube on Bakuna. So, compared to some of these other spaces I've been in, a 21-inch diameter tube is plenty of room, but when you think about getting shot out of there with compressed air, it's not a great feeling. Our number 5 spot also goes to another ship. Iowa-class battleships have absolutely amazing gun turrets, but the cruiser Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts has an even more technologically sophisticated main battery gunnery system. So the turret crawl we got to do on that ship through a lot of her auto-loading spaces was really, really cool. Because it's an auto-load turret, some of the spaces we went through were not meant for normal human habitation. It was just for servicing the guns. So that was a really cool and unique space to see because it is one generation beyond what we have here on Battleship New Jersey. Our number 4 spot is the most recent tight space that I've gotten to crawl inside, and that is the condensers underneath of the ship's main boilers. So that's one of those spots that, you know, you read about, but you never think you're going to get the chance to climb into. And finding one that we had open for dealing with a leak in the past and being able to see the condenser tubes and everything in there was really special for me, as well as being able to see the opening in the bottom that forms the sea chest. In the number 3 spot, we're going back to submarines. Getting to crawl inside of the pressure hull of the submarine drum was a really unique experience for me. Thankfully, I'm not afraid of spiders, so it wasn't that bad of an experience. Drum is doing some maintenance work between the pressure hull and the exterior skin of the ship, so being to crawl into that space and see where ballast water or fuel would be manipulated to change the level of the boat when she's diving and surfacing was a really unique experience for me, especially since one of the ships I worked on before coming to New Jersey was a submarine. In our number 2 spot, getting to climb inside the boilers. Again, this is another one that, you know, I've taught people about for a long time, but I'd never been able to go inside and see. So it was really interesting going in and being able to see the water tubes and the fire brick and where the burner barrels go and all of that. We got to do this on 2 occasions. Once with the boilers on the Battleship Massachusetts, and then later we were able to figure out where the access ports were on the Battleship New Jersey. So those 2 boilers built to a very different scale, and it was really interesting looking around both. And finally, the number 1 spot, crawling down a 16-inch gun barrel.
Today, we're going to do something that I've always wanted to do. I'm going to crawl through a 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7 gun barrel.
Now, this one is real special for me because every battleship documentary I watched as a kid shows a sailor like coming out of the end of one of the barrels and giving the thumbs up. I was like, man, I want to do that someday. I never thought I'd get the chance to. But working here, we've got a spare gun barrel in the parking lot that I was able to crawl down. So we know I fit in the 16-inch gun barrel. We also tested a 14-inch gun barrel, and I can fit through that, although we weren't allowed to take footage of it. I've tried a 12-inch gun barrel, and I can't fit in that. So I'm trying to find a British 13.5-inch gun barrel to see if I can fit in there. If you know where one is, let us know in the comment section down below. So, those are some of my favorite spaces that we've gotten to climb in so far, and hopefully there will be many more in the future. As a reminder, in case you happen to have your own Iowa-class battleship at home, we go through a number of safety procedures prior to going into any of these spaces. These include testing the air quality, we have an EMT on hand whenever we do this, and our team includes over 60 years experience working on ships and museum ships. So, what is your favorite small space that we've gotten to climb into? What are some other types of spaces you'd like to see in the future? Let us know in the comment section down below. Like I said, the 16-inch gun barrel is my absolute favorite so far, until I find a smaller gun barrel. All of the videos we've talked about here are listed in the comment section down below, so if you haven't seen one of those yet, feel free to go back and watch them now. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.